Hello everyone, my name is Jaspreet. Welcome to my studio. Today I'm back with another hand building tutorial and I'll show you how I make these flower bowls. I have really enjoyed making them as with all my other projects. Now I'm actually in the middle of my market season. I have a bunch of markets coming up in the next couple of weeks and months. And I like to make these little pieces for my markets along with the bigger ones because these are an easy sell, especially for people who've not seen you before, not met you before, never been exposed to your work. For them, it's an easy thing to pick and try. If they like your work, if they enjoy their work, the first time around, they might not, pick up the biggest piece on the table. They'll probably go with something small. So I like to make these smaller pieces because they tend to move a lot faster. And over the last 3 years, I've noticed that my work is usually bought as gift. Like especially during this season, a lot of people buy my work as gift. So every year I try to come up with a bunch of new designs, a bunch of new patterns, so that people who already bought from me and who I know like my works have more options to choose from, new things to pick from. So I like to always, come up with a few different ideas, a few new designs every year. Last year I did these flower bowls in this format with simple flowers. This year I obviously modified it a little bit to make these kind of pieces. And this is for the smaller ones. Also, in terms of the bigger pieces, I do like to make a few new items, a few different items which are more festive, more apt for the season. So I'll probably share them in my subsequent videos or maybe on Instagram. You'll definitely see them. As I said, I'm in the middle of a market season. So if you'd like to see behind the scenes, what is the prep that goes into it? What are the pieces that I bring with me? What is the reason for this? What are the price points and how I set up my table and things like that? Let me know in the comments below. If that's something that interests you, I'd be happy to share those, but they will be more vlog kind of a video. But you can always do that. Also, today I'll be showing you how I make these flower bowls. I'll not be glazing them. If you'd like to see a tutorial on how I glaze them, please let me know again in the comments so I can get to that. But for now, let's get started with making these flower bowls. Okay, so here's my clay slab. This is rolled to a quarter of inch in thickness. And even though we're making a small piece, I mean, this is a really small piece, even though we're making this smaller piece, I am not going to thin down my clay any further because we have to press down the leaves to make this texture, to get this texture and this shape and things like that. So I'm not going to thin it down any further because that will end up tearing my clay when I press it to make these petal, impressions and things like that. So that's why it's not going to be thinned down any further. I am going to compress my clay using my yellow shredded mud tool rib with the flat side facing down at an angle. I just go over the clay surface and compress the clay and get rid of the clay texture. This is something which just happens automatically now. It's just part of my process. And flip and do the same on this side as well. All right, here's my clay all prepped. Now the next step is to cut out the shapes, the flower shape. I'm going to be using this cookie cutter. All of this will be linked in the description. You can find on my Amazon storefront. Just one more note about the Amazon storefront. A lot of people assume that I'm selling those things. I'm not selling any of these tools. These are all available on Amazon by different sellers. I just list them together in a store where you can easily find the links to those. That's it. I'm not selling any of these. So that's the cutter I'll be using. Now, before I start cutting, I am going to just release the clay to make sure that it's not stuck onto the board. So when I cut down my smaller flower shapes, I don't have to peel each and every one off, individually. So I just release the clay once. And now because I'm using this plastic cutter, it does tend to stick the clay a lot. So what I'm going to do is, now some people like to use a plastic and a cutter to do that. This cutter is not very sharp. I've tried it. It's not very sharp, so I'm not going to use plastic because then I'm not going to get really clean rims, edges. So I'm not going to be using plastic, but you can use that. I'll be using a little bit of cornstarch on the clay surface, just with a brush. I'm going to dust it over. I have a bigger brush which I use. Oh, there it is. This is my brush that I like to use. Nice and fluffy. Just to place it all over the clay. Okay, this will absorb some of the excess moisture from the clay. And the other thing I'm going to be doing all along is using this on the rim of my cutter as well, because like I said, this one tends to stick quite a bit. Pressing in, making sure it's all the way through from all sides, and then releasing. Okay. Move this onto another board here. Yeah, that's a clean cut. Again, you'll see some of the clay stuck on here. Just get rid of this. That will give you a better cut for the next round. This happens specifically with this particular cutter. I'm not sure why, but again, just brushing a little bit of cornstarch here and pressing it in and release. With the steel cutters, this kind, I mean, they also stick sometimes, but only after like 3-4 cuts is when they start sticking. This one sticks every time you put it in clay. So just use a little bit of cornstarch and continue your cutting process. I don't like how messy cornstarch can get on the table, because then it looks like your table is dirty. I just cleaned up my table, now it's all dusty. Ah, that's part of the process. It's okay, it's okay. Just breathe. Clean this off. Don't throw away these scraps just now, because we're going to be cutting, because you have to make these feet. We'll be using those, so don't throw them away. So that's the last one. And now I'm going to cut out the feet. Let me just clean this up one last time. Last time I finish using it, then I go in with a damp sponge and clean it off nicely, so it's ready to use the next time around. Okay, there you go. Now for these scraps, I'm going to bring in a little circle cookie cutter. This is about half an inch in diameter. I'll be using this one. I know I've just wiped it with a damp sponge. Let me just wipe it off. Okay, so this is going to be my little foot at the base. So I'm going to cut out these circles. I got 8 flowers from this. So I'm going to try and get 8 circles where I can. See, here also it's started to stick. That happens. So this one will be, I'll dip this in water, dunk it in water actually, just this cold mass, and then put it in a plastic bag and let it get a little soft, wedge it back again, and use it to make more of these bowls and smaller things with my recycled clay. Okay, now on to step number 2. I'm gonna bring in my banding wheel and this the board, and here's my flower shape. Now I have to, the next step is adding these petal thingies, this petal impression in clay. And for that, I will be using this silicone mold. Again, this will be listed. These are available in a lot of different kind of, designs and veining and stuff. So this is another one. So it's up to you what you like, which kind of pattern you like. I really like this one, so I'm going to use this one. Now with this, when this came, this comes as a set like this. But if you see here, this one had a little bit of, the mold sticking out, and that was tearing into my clay when I was pressing it in. So I just kind of chopped it off with the scalpel, just remove that so that it's a little blunt and it doesn't, poke through the clay and cut it out. So that's one thing. Just check for your mold. It may not be in all the molds. It just happens. Some of them have this issue. Okay, this is what I'll be using, and because it's silicone mold and because there's a lot of very fine veining and very fine details in here, what happens is that the clay tends to stick quite a bit in these. So for these I have to use cornstarch. There's just no two way about it. I mean, there's no option without using that. So I'm going to be putting cornstarch on my clay, the back and the front, and also on this, because like I said, they tend to really stick to the clay. So there are two parts, like I explained earlier. Like this comes like this. Now this is the one with a little bit of depression, and this is the one which is a little raised. So the depressed one goes underneath. The raised one comes on top. I'm not very precise about lining the two together, exactly. That doesn't matter. Just holding on to the two and then pressing on my leaf, on my petal like this. There you go. You'll see that's what happens. It gives it a little bit of shape and it thins down the clay. That's why we did not thin it down even further, because if it was thinner, then there is a likelihood that your clay will, start tearing. And it may happen even at this thickness. I think it's manageable, but it's better not to go thinner than a quarter of an inch, even though it's a small piece. Okay. So I'm going to continue doing this all the way around. Just add cornstarch here and on this. And yes, I pick cornstarch from my table so I don't have to clean it up later. Not because I'm skimping on the cornstarch. It's just I don't like the white powder everywhere. Anyways, okay, just pressing it again and very lightly releasing it. See here, I've pressed a little too much, and you can see that the clay has come apart. That's okay. It's a petal. It will not really matter much, but be careful depending on what kind of clay you're using. With this clay, it'll work. Just pressing, starting pressing at the bottom of the petal, like at the center of the petal, and then going all the way up. Okay, you don't really need the banding wheel for this, but and you can see I'm using cornstarch every time I'm pressing this, because like I said, this particular mold does tend to get a little too sticky. And cornstarch is a great release agent. And this is the last one. And don't worry about being very precise with where exactly the petal is and things like that. It's not going to matter. There you go. So there you have your petals all done. The next stage is where we need our banding wheel and a clay knife. I'm going to be using the scalpel thingy. With this, I'm going to start making some. I'm going to start making some bevel cuts, like angled cuts at all of these points, right, where the two petals meet. I'm going to start making some beveled cuts. Okay, not being very precise about where I'm cutting. I'm just kind of eyeballing it, more or less uh, equidistant, just going through. Okay, like this. So I have made these six petal. I've made these six angled cuts here. Okay, now because my clay is still soft, I do not necessarily see a need to score the the sides here, but I will add a little bit of water. So it's up to you. You want to add water and then go in and attach them, or do you want to score them? Again, this will depend on your clay and how soft or dry it is. I'm thinking I'll just use it here. So I'm just scoring one side, dipping my serrated ribbon water, scoring on one side. Because my clay is soft, I I could have just gone in with some water, but again, I'm just scoring it a little bit. And then I'm placing these two, like all of these cuts, I'm going to be overlapping these. So this is not just an overlap at the bevel, just at the bevels that we cut, but slightly inside. So I'm pushing the two petals together. I'm overlapping them like this. Now, how your flower turns out, how the bowl turns out, will depend on how much of an overlap you have between the two petals. So if you overlap just slightly, you'll have a bigger flower. If you overlap more, then you'll have a more narrower looking flower bowl, right? So that's the only thing. And make a few of these to see what shape you like. Okay, so right now I'm just bringing these two together and kind of tacking them in, not pressing too much, just eyeballing how much I need to, you know, overlap and press them together. Again, these are flowers. It's a more organic shape. I'm not being very precise about exactly where I need to overlap and things like that. Okay, so right now I've just tagged all of them together. You can see they just kind of tagged together. I haven't attached them really. Now I'll start attaching, where I'll start pressing these together. Now I'm just, as you can see, I'm holding on to this and I'm just pressing it together. Okay, and pressing it together from the inside and the outside as well. Just pinching it together like this. Okay, you can do it while it's sitting on the board, it's better. Right, so we just do that, pinching from the inside and the outside, making sure the two uh, edges are actually, sitting together. That's first step. And there is a bit of overlap, so you have to press a little bit. Your bowl will stretch out a little bit. That's okay. Okay, so once that step is done, then I'm going to start blending these together. Now if you see, you can see this overlap here, and you can see that there's a petal coming in. You can leave it at that if you want, but what I like to do is, again with the damp fingers, just go in and blend these two together. This will obviously make sure that my join is secure. It's nicely done. Okay, this, again I'm just adding a little bit of moisture to my fingers and then going over the clay surface, making sure everything is nicely sealed. Okay, there you go. This also, if you need, just add a little bit of moisture back in, because we added the cornstarch. That does dry out the clay a tiny bit. Okay, there you can see there, and this is the last one. These are all blended in. Okay, we have to do the same thing on the outside as well, just blending all of it. Now I am holding on to this in such a manner because I have to show you what I'm doing. But when you are doing it, please see, I'm just blending the two together. When you're doing it, please place it here, get down to the table level, and then, you know, just blend the sides together. This is just to make sure that it doesn't crack and it's nicely blended. The two petals are like holding together. And every time I go in, I'm just dampening my fingers because my clay is drying out thanks to the cornstarch. But if your clay is really soft, you don't have to, you know, use damp fingers. This makes sure that our join is nice and secure and everything is nicely blended. Okay, that is done. Let me just show you. Okay, and you'll see the texture from all of these areas has gone away. While I'm here, I'm just making sure I blend all of these edges in. Okay, that's done. Now you know what we're going to do. We'll take our silicone tip tool. I'm just cleaning this off, and I'm going to make those marks again, which I just blended in. So this is an easy step. You don't have to be very precise because a lot of this is going to get covered with the glaze. But at the same time, I don't want that flat, plain um, area there. So I'm just adding these. You can see, let me show you here. So with my silicone tip tool, just randomly adding these lines. Now with this texture, this random lines, they work really well. There you go. It also blends that in even further. Oopsie. You can see it's getting old, my tool. And then just keep going. Yeah, this is already done. Okay, you see I'm not being very precise, and that's okay. And we're doing the exact same thing on the outside as well. I'm going to have to hold this and show it to you. Just cleaning the tip here, and then you can see I'm not being precise at all. I'm just making sure you have those lines there. Now I'm doing this so you can see. When you do this, please make it, it's sitting on its board, it's sitting on the table, and then get down to the table level, to your eye level and table level, and keep making these marks. And don't worry, you'll have some clay crumbs coming up because you're making these lines. We'll clean them up once our pot has stiffened up. Right now it's really soft, so we're not going to do any of the cleanup stuff. We're just making the lines because this will be difficult to do later on. Okay, so once I have done this, the line work on the outside, next step is just cleaning off and, blending in the edges here, all these joints over here, right here. I will take my silicone tip tool and just clean silicone tip tool and go over all of these joints here. You'll see a little bit of a gap right here. Just take this and blend it in. Okay, just dipping it in water a little bit, taking the excess off on the sponge, and then just coming in here to blend these two in nicely. Okay, if you need to add a little bit of moisture, you can do that. Like I'm just dipping this in water and then taking the excess off on my sponge and then coming in here and just blending these two together. Okay, this is done. Next step is just cleaning the inside a little bit. I'm going to press this and clean this up, just the center a little bit. Okay, the other thing we can do right now is shape our flower. If you want this to be a little bit more, rounder, like coming in like this, you can do that. Just pressing everything in a little bit. Some of this is coming off, so I'm going to just seal it up. Okay, so you shape your bowl the way you want it. And another thing you can do it again, this is quite an organic shape. It's not very precise, but one thing you can do is just lift and see from the side if it's looking uniform. Just check that. And one last thing that you can do is before you let it set up a little bit is take a synthetic brush, just dip it in water, take the excess off, and again I'm going to go over these joints here. If I see any gaps, I'm going to just take care of those right now. Because while the clay is soft, you can still do any of that um, little bit of the cleanup work, joining work if there's required. Okay, again, that's done. I'm going to quickly check on the outside as well if it looks good. We will be doing the cleanup. We will be doing the cleanup in a while. We'll go back in and clean everything up. Right now, just have to let this set up. Okay, I think I'm good now. This looks okay to me. Now I'll let this set up a little bit to the point where I can lift it and add my little foot ring at the base. Okay, so I'll be doing that. I still need to add that. I haven't done it yet. That'll happen once this has set up a little bit. This has also had some time to set up, and then we can join the two together and should be okay. And while this is getting dry, while this is drying out, I'm going to quickly just add my signature to the base here. I have this now because this is small. My signature is kind of longer than this. So I have these little chops. This is little signature, bisque signatures that I've made. This is just my initials, JK. I'm going to press this in and right at the center, just making my, this just says JK, that's all. Okay, that's done. So that's my foot ring, all the feet done. I'll be making the rest of my flower bowls as well, and once they are set up and ready, we'll start attaching them. So here's our flower dish. It has stiffened up quite a bit, and you can see I can easily hold it in my hand without warping, without distorting the shape. And this is a good time when we can add our base. Now, if you don't want to add your base, it's perfectly all right. You can use it as it is. I like that little lift. Let me show you. I like this little lift at the base. So I'm going to be adding my feet, little foot actually, just one round circle. So this is just a circle that we cut out with my signature stamp inside. Just taking this, dipping my serrated ribbon water and scoring it aggressively. My clay is not really leather hard. It's close to that, it's close to leather hard. I think it's almost at leather hard, but So I'm scoring it rather aggressively. I'm scoring it really aggressively, and you can see there's enough slip generated right here. And I'm going to do the same thing here as well. Now, if your clay has dried out a little bit, you can add additional slip and go in. There's no rule against it. I just work like this, and it works for me. I'm just going to go ahead and so I score really aggressively. You can see how aggressive I am with my scoring, but I'm holding on to the pot very, lightly, delicately. Now I'm going to try and find the center. My stamp is not centered, but I'm going to try and find the center here so it doesn't look off once it's sitting straight. Okay, I think that looks good. Now I'm going to hold on to the pot from one side and the foot from the other, the ring, and just press along the sides. Make sure it's all attached properly. Just going around, pressing the foot in. Okay, and then I'm going to place it here and then press in the center. Be careful not to press too much. Make sure you're just covering the foot and not pressing around this area, otherwise you'll break your piece. I'm just making sure it's nice and smooth. And then we'll bring in our silicone tip tool and just go around cleaning the edge off. So you see how soft, stiff my clay is. Not too soft, not too sweat, just at the right, moisture level where I can add this foot ring, hold on to the pot, add the foot ring without distorting it, right? So that is done. So now what I'll do is, once we've added the foot, I'm going to quickly clean it up with my damp sponge. Just go over the sides here, cleaning it up. If there are any clay crumbs, if you want, you can do the cleanup right here or wait for your pot to stiffen up a little bit more. I'm going to do a little bit of cleanup just here. I'll probably come back in. Okay. And if you see right now, it's quite stiff. My pot is it's fairly stiff. So I'm going to go in and clean up the rim as well, the edges as well. So with a damp sponge, we'll just go over to smoothen everything out. Again, make sure your sponge is damp, not drippy. You don't want water dripping through your clay and pulling in one particular area because that's going to cause cracking and all kinds of issues. So just taking this, I'm just holding on to this so you can see what I'm doing, but basically just going over the edges, making sure they're nice and smooth and there are no clay crumbs there. Just going inside as well to take care of any clay crumbs. You can do this a little later as well when it's closer to bone dry, but just doing it right now. Okay, we do it on this side and we do the same thing on the other side as well. Just turn it around and get rid of any unevenness, any clay bits, uneven marks, or basically clay crumbs because we made all those marks with our silicone tip tool. So you'll find some clay crumbs on the surface. Just take care of those. Like I said, you can let your clay set up a little bit before you do this. So now my flower dish is finally ready. This is what it looks like. I'm happy with this. This will dry slowly under a sheet of plastic because sometimes they can still warp. Even though it's a small piece, it can still warp. Like I have one here, which is, yeah, this one, if you see, this has warped. I know it doesn't look that obvious, but probably if I show you this way, it's warped this way. It's a little bit more narrow than I'd like it to be. So, it can still warp. So just be careful. Again, dry it slowly under a plastic. Then we will put it through a bisque firing. Once it's bisque fired and ready, then we'll get down to glaze.
And if you'd like to see the glazing tutorial, please let me know in the comments below. If you like the video, please like and subscribe. It really helps our channel. And I'll see you next week with another tutorial. Bye.